I never considered myself superstitious. Ghost stories were just that, stories. But I wasn't prepared for what I would witness when I took a job as a graveyard cleaner. The pay was decent, the hours weren't bad, and honestly I liked the quiet. Or at least I thought I did. The cemetery wasn't one of those picturesque, well-kept places with manicured lawns and marble angels watching over the dead. No, this was an old burial ground, the kind where headstones leaned at odd angles, half swallowed by time and neglect. It had been around for over a century, and some of the graves were so worn that the names had been erased by the elements. My job was simple: clear the overgrown grass, clean the tombstones, and pick up the garbage left behind by the occasional visitor. Nothing fancy. I wasn't a groundskeeper, I was just a cleaner. But from the moment I stepped through those rusting iron gates, something felt off. At first it was small things. A whisper of wind that seemed to carry voices. Shadows that didn't quite match up to where the trees stood. I chalked it up to my imagination, a trick of being alone in a place where death outnumbered the living. But then, on my third night shift, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It started with a sound. A rhythmic tapping, like fingernails drumming on wood. I turned off my leaf blower, expecting to find some kid messing around. But the cemetery was empty, bathed in the cold glow of the streetlights beyond the gate. The sound continued. Tap, tap, tap. I followed it, weaving through the graves, my flashlight beam bouncing off the worn stone markers. The noise led me to an old, cracked mausoleum near the back of the cemetery. Its heavy iron doors were slightly ajar, despite the thick chain that was supposed to keep them shut. The tapping stopped. I stood there, my breath visible in the night air, every instinct telling me to turn around and leave. But then, from deep inside the mausoleum, I heard it. A voice. A woman's voice whispering my name. And that was when I realized I had never told anyone I worked here. The whisper curled through the still night air, wrapping itself around me like a cold breath against the back of my neck. It wasn't loud, nor was it pleading, it was a soft murmur, just enough to be heard above the silence. My name, spoken so gently that, for a moment, it felt almost intimate. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the handle of my flashlight, its beam trembling slightly as I pointed it at the mausoleum's door. The chain meant to keep it locked hung loosely from one side, swaying just slightly as if someone had only recently slipped inside. The stone around the entrance was cracked and worn with age, its engravings softened by time, but I could still make out the name etched above the doorway: Bellamy. I didn't know the name, nor did I want to. Everything in me screamed to turn around, to pretend I had never heard anything, to walk out of this graveyard and never look back. But my body wouldn't listen. My feet took a hesitant step forward, then another, gravel crunching softly beneath my boots as I reached out with my free hand and pressed my palm against the cool, damp surface of the door. It gave way too easily. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of mildew and earth, a weight pressing against my lungs the moment I stepped in. My flashlight flickered as I lifted it, casting a pale glow across the small, confined space. Rows of stone shelves lined the walls, each holding a coffin sealed shut with tarnished plaques, their names barely legible beneath layers of dust. The ceiling arched low, and in the farthest corner, beneath a narrow slit of moonlight from a crack in the wall, something moved. I stopped breathing. At first, I thought it was just my own shadow shifting with the beam of my flashlight, but then I saw it again, a slow, deliberate motion, like the way a person shifts their weight from one foot to another. My fingers fumbled against the flashlight's grip as I aimed the beam directly at the corner. Nothing. Only a tall, standing casket, its wooden surface darkened with time. But something about it unsettled me. Unlike the others, it wasn't completely closed. There was a thin gap, no more than an inch wide, running down the center where the lid should have been flush. A breath of air seemed to slip through the crack, sending a shiver down my spine. I took another step forward, reaching out before I could think better of it. The wood was cold, almost damp, and as my fingers brushed against the edge, the whisper came again. Close. Right against my ear. I jerked back so fast I nearly dropped the flashlight, my pulse hammering as the beam wavered wildly across the walls. The whisper hadn't been distant this time, it had been right beside me. And then the casket creaked. A long drawn-out groan of old wood shifting against rusted hinges, the kind of sound that sets your teeth on edge. My breath caught as the gap widened, inch by inch, revealing nothing but blackness inside. My body locked in place, every muscle screaming to run, but I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. And then, from that abyss, fingers, thin, colorless fingers curled around the edge of the casket lid. They didn't belong to anything living. I stumbled backward, my back slamming against the cold stone wall as I tried to suck in a breath. But the air in the mausoleum had thickened, pressing in on my throat like invisible hands. The fingers twitched, gripping the lid tighter, and as they did, the whisper returned, this time not as a single voice but as a chorus. Dozens of murmurs, overlapping, rising from the very walls, the shelves, the caskets around me. Some were unintelligible, others were barely more than breath, but through them all, one word repeated over and over. Stay. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you like this story. The voices wrapped around me, whispering from the cracks in the stone, seeping from the very air itself. Stay. The word curled through the cold, damp air, spoken in different tones, some pleading, some commanding, some barely more than a breath. The fingers on the casket lid flexed, pressing into the wood, their nails long, jagged, too pale, digging against the grain. I forced my body to move, to push away from the wall, to step backward toward the open doorway. My flashlight shook in my grip, its beam flickering over the crypt, catching glimpses of dust motes swirling in the stale air. The whispers didn't stop. They layered upon each other, growing louder, more insistent, their invisible presence pressing against my skin like damp fabric. Then, a sharp, grinding crack. The lid of the casket jolted, shifting another inch, and the fingers pushed against the opening. A breath of air, warm and rancid, exhaled from within, carrying the scent of rot and damp earth. My stomach clenched, nausea rising, but I didn't dare look away. My feet shuffled backward, slow and hesitant, the heel of my boot catching against the loose stone. The moment I stumbled, the whispers stopped. Silence swallowed the crypt. A silence so heavy it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My own breathing sounded too loud, my heartbeat a relentless drum in my ears. I wanted to turn and run, to bolt from this place and never set foot near it again. But something inside me knew if I turned my back, if I looked away, it would move. The gap in the casket widened. The fingers, those grotesque, lifeless things, tightened their grip. And then, as if whatever was inside had been waiting for the exact moment my guard would break, it pushed. The lid slid open just enough for the darkness within to spill out, a void blacker than the shadows around it. And in that void something shifted. Something rose. Not fast. Not sudden. But deliberate. My breath caught in my throat as the outline of a face, or what should have been a face, emerged from the shadows of the casket. The skin was wrong, stretched too tight over sharp, unnatural features. Its eyes, if they were eyes at all, were hollow, sunken pits, darker than anything I'd ever seen, deeper than they should have been. It saw me. I felt it. A presence more than just sight. A weight inside my skull, pressing against the back of my eyes, against my thoughts, pushing into me. The thing didn't lunge. It didn't crawl. It only stared, its mouth a thin, unnatural line slowly parting. And then, in the same whispering voice that had first called my name, it spoke. But it didn't say stay. It said, you remember. And somewhere deep in my mind, something shifted. A memory long buried, long forgotten stirred. I had been here before. The words slithered through my mind, wrapping around the deepest parts of my memory like roots through cracked stone. You remember? No, I wanted to say. No, I don't. I had never been here before. Never seen this place, never felt the weight of these voices pressing against my ribs, never looked into those hollow, devouring eyes. But the moment the words were spoken, something inside me buckled. A flash of something else, something buried. A moment blurred, fragmented, pushing its way to the surface. The smell of damp earth, the feel of cold stone under my palms. The distant hum of voices, murmuring just beneath the level of sound, like a forgotten song still lingering in the back of my mind. My breath shuddered. The crypt no longer felt like an unfamiliar place. It felt like something I had left behind. The figure in the coffin didn't move closer. It didn't need to. Its presence was everywhere, saturating the very air I breathed. The fingers still clung to the lid, unnaturally long, their skin stretched too thin over rigid knuckles. And its mouth slightly parted, as if caught between a whisper and a breath, was not empty. There was something inside. Something that shifted, coiled, writhed. I didn't want to see. I couldn't see. I tore my gaze away, forcing my feet to move, to stumble toward the open crypt door. My shoulder hit the stone frame hard enough to jolt me, but I barely registered the pain. My pulse hammered against my skull, every instinct screaming to get out, out, out. But the moment I reached the threshold, a sound stopped me. Not the whispers. Not the creak of the coffin. A footstep. Soft. Deliberate. Just behind me. I froze. My throat closed, my body locking into place. The air shifted just slightly, just enough to tell me something was standing there. Right behind me. I could feel it. Not the figure in the coffin, this was different. Closer. The breath of something not quite human brushing against the back of my neck. the pressure of its presence sinking into my skin. I turned my head, just enough, and in the periphery of my vision I saw it. A shape. Not like a person of a person, or what had once been one. A figure draped in something dark, something not quite cloth, shifting too smoothly like water moving through air. Its face, or where a face should have been, was a smudge, an absence. Not empty, but something deeper than empty. It didn't move. It only waited. The crypt pulsed with silence. The whispers had vanished. The mausoleum had swallowed its breath. And then, it raised its hand, slowly, almost gently, and with one long withered finger, it pointed. Not at me. At the ground. At the dirt just beyond the crypt's threshold. I didn't want to look, but something made me. And as my gaze dropped to the soil beneath me, my breath stopped. Because I saw it. A name. Faint, half erased by time, barely more than an impression in the earth. But I could still read it. Still recognize it. My name. Carved into the dirt like a forgotten epitaph. I had been here before. And I had never left. The letters were shallow, half swallowed by dirt, but they were there. My name. Etched into the ground as if someone or something had scratched it into the soil, knowing one day I would stand here, looking down at it, breath locked in my chest. My knees felt weak, my pulse a sharp hammer against my ribs. The ground beneath my feet no longer felt solid. It was as if the dirt had become softer, looser, like it was waiting to pull me under. The figure beside me remained still, its smudged, shifting face locked in that empty, watching silence. The coffin behind me remained cracked open, fingers still curled over the lid. And between them, between the thing that pointed and the thing that whispered, I stood in the center, caught between something I didn't understand and something I was starting to remember. A memory. Not clear, not whole, but fractured, surfacing in broken pieces. I had been here before. Not as a worker. Not as someone cleaning the graves. I had stood here. In this exact place. Staring down at the earth. Only then, the ground had been fresh, dark with moisture. Disturbed as if something had been recently buried. And my hands. My hands had been covered in dirt. My breath hitched, my lungs locking up as the weight of that realization hit me like a stone to the chest. My fingers twitched at my sides, and for the first time I felt it, the phantom weight of soil under my nails. As if the memory of digging, of burying, had never truly left me. But what had I buried? The whispering thing inside the coffin shifted again. The fingers tightened their grip against the lid, as if the presence inside was growing restless. The thing beside me, the one pointing at my name in the dirt, lowered its hand. The moment it did, the ground beneath my feet shifted. It was slight. Barely more than a breath. But I felt it. The soil sank just a little. As if something underneath had just moved. I stumbled back, my heels scraping against the threshold of the crypt. My heart was a wild, erratic thing inside my chest, beating against the cage of my ribs like it was trying to escape before I could. The whispers returned. But they weren't scattered this time. They weren't layered voices slipping from the stone. They were coming from underneath me. A muffled sound pressed against earth, vibrating through the ground itself. The voices were under the dirt. Beneath my name. Beneath the place where I had once stood, where I had once buried something. And then, as if the final piece of memory had been waiting for me to hear it, the earth shuddered. Not much. Just the slightest tremor. But I knew. Something was waking up. Something I had put there. And it was coming back. The tremor was subtle, just a shift of loose soil, but I felt it through the soles of my boots, through the marrow of my bones. The whispers, those muffled, choked voices, curled up from the depths like something struggling toward the surface. I didn't want to hear them, didn't want to recognize the shape of the words. But I did. Let me out. My breath shuddered through my teeth. The figure beside me remained still, its shape like a smudge against reality, as if it wasn't something truly present, just an impression, a stain left behind by something long gone. His hand, now lowered, twitched. Not by accident. Not as a reflex. Like it was waiting. And the thing in the coffin, it was waiting too. The fingers gripping the lid no longer trembled. They were steady. Holding. Pressing. Keeping something inside. The realization struck me hard enough to make my vision swim. The thing inside the coffin wasn't trying to escape. It was keeping something else from getting out. The ground beneath my name trembled again, more insistently this time, like something underneath was testing the weight of its prison. I took a step back. The figure at my side twitched again. Turned its head toward me. I didn't see the motion, not really, just the vague, impossible shift of its presence. A feeling in the air, a dragging of something unseen. I knew I understood now. I had been here before. And I had buried something alive. A sharp, splintering sound tore through the air. I flinched, my flashlight jerking wildly as I turned my gaze back to the coffin. The lid had cracked further, splinters of wood peeling away beneath those motionless, rigid fingers. The force pushing against it, the thing inside was straining now, holding tighter, as if the balance between keeping itself shut and being forced open from below was at its breaking point. And then, beneath my feet, the earth collapsed. Not all of it, just a small, sinking indentation where my name had been scrawled. A perfect, shallow impression. Like a breath exhaled from underneath. I didn't mean to make a sound, but a strangled noise forced its way out of my throat. The dirt wasn't just shifting. It was splitting. Thin, broken cracks spread through the soil, veins of empty space forming in the earth. And from those cracks, something reached out. A hand. Not like the one in the coffin. This one was wrong. Bloated, damp, swollen. The fingers curled in spasms, twitching like a thing not used to moving. Its nails were cracked, filled with dirt, the skin around them peeled back. Torn as if something had been clawing. Digging. I stumbled back so fast I almost tripped. My boots skidded against the stone threshold of the crypt, and for one desperate moment, my mind screamed at me to run. But the figure beside me, it moved. Its arm lifted again, too fluid, too weightless, and this time it didn't just point. It reached for me. A slow, deliberate motion. Not grabbing. Not demanding. Offering. The hand in the ground twitched. Fingers spasming, then curling, gripping the dirt like it was ready to pull itself out. The thing in the coffin shuddered, its fingers pressing tighter, the wood straining against the force. The whispers swelled. Let me out. I knew what was about to happen. The thing in the ground was going to rise. The thing in the coffin was barely holding it back. And the figure at my side, it wanted me to decide. To choose. To remember what I had buried. And whether or not I was going to let it crawl back into the world. The hand in the earth twitched. A slow, jerking movement, fingers curling into the loose dirt, clawing upward. My breath came in ragged gasps, my pulse hammering against my ribs. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to move, to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The ground beneath the hand was sinking now, widening, pulling apart like something deep below was pushing against it, forcing itself through. The cracks spread, veins of darkness opening in the earth, and from within them, the whispers slithered up like breath escaping a corpse. Let me out. The words didn't come from one voice. They came from many. Layered over one another, warped and strangled, some pleading, some laughing, some barely more than rattling air. The thing in the coffin, whatever it was, held firm. Its fingers still gripping the lid, dug in harder, the knuckles unnaturally rigid like a body frozen in rigor. The air inside the crypt thickened, as if the thing within was straining against the pull of whatever was rising from the dirt. And beside me, the figure, the watcher, did not move. It only waited. Waited for me to understand. The memories I had fought to keep buried were clawing their way out. And somewhere in the deepest part of my mind, a door creaked open. I had been here before. I had stood in this exact place, not as a worker, not as a stranger to the dead, but as someone who had taken part in their silence. I had been the one to bury whatever was underneath. But I hadn't done it alone. A sharp jolt tore through my chest, a feeling like something had just cracked open inside me. The image hit me so fast and so violently that I staggered, a memory, unbidden, unstoppable. A night like this one. A shallow grave, the earth fresh and heavy. My hands slick with dirt. Another set of hands beside me. A voice whispering, telling me to keep digging, telling me it had to be done. And something below us shifting in the soil. My stomach turned violently. I tasted iron. I wasn't alone. Not then. And maybe not now. The hand in the ground lurched upward, elbow bending, pressing against the sinking soil. Pushing. The coffin creaked, the wood splitting further. The air around me became thick, choking. The walls of the crypt tightened as if the entire space had become something else, something alive. The watcher at my side lowered its arm again. A choice. I could let it out. Or I could keep it buried. But if I had buried it once, why? And who had been with me? Somewhere in the dark, in the fractures of my own mind, I heard laughter. Not from the whispers. Not from the thing in the coffin. But from a voice I almost recognized. And then, the ground split wide open. And something began to crawl out. The earth broke open beneath me, spilling loose soil in a slow, crumbling collapse. The hand that had clawed its way free pressed down, forcing its weight against the dirt, and something else, something bigger, something whole began to rise from the grave I had once buried. I stumbled back, my boots scraping against the stone threshold of the crypt. My breath came in shallow, ragged bursts, but I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. The fingers of the buried thing flexed. The damp skin cracked at the knuckles, revealing something black beneath, something that writhed in the spaces where veins should have been. Its arm followed next, pushing further from the depths, and as the dirt fell away I saw it, a face. Or at least what had once been a face. Pale, slack flesh, bloated from time and decay. Lips that had begun to curl away from teeth. Eyes that should have been empty. But they weren't. They were open. And they were looking at me. A sound rattled through the crypt, not quite a breath, not quite a whisper. More like a memory spoken aloud. The thing in the grave knew me. The thing in the grave remembered. A wave of nausea swelled in my stomach as another fragmented memory slammed into me. A night like this one, the weight of a shovel in my hands, dirt on my skin, a voice beside me saying, "It has to be done." And the thing in the grave, alive, screaming. I had buried something that hadn't been dead. I had buried someone. The realization hit me like a fist to the ribs. My knees nearly gave out. I pressed a hand against the stone wall to keep myself upright, my fingers trembling. The thing continued to pull itself free, shoulders dragging up through the loosened soil, ribs pressing against skin, stretching it too thin. It wasn't just crawling out. It was becoming whole again. And then it spoke. Not with the layered whispers from before. Not in a voice distorted by the weight of dirt. But in a voice I knew. A voice that had once laughed beside me. A voice that had once whispered in the dark, that had once helped me dig. "You left me." My stomach twisted. The crypt walls felt too close, the air too thick. I tried to force my feet to move, but something rooted me in place. Because it wasn't just the dead thing in the dirt that was moving. The figure beside me, the watcher, tilted its head, the smudge of its face shifting, and I felt it. I knew it too. The laughter in my memories, the voice telling me to keep digging, it had belonged to someone. To the person standing next to me. The one who had never left. The one who had been watching all along. The grave was open now, gaping, waiting. The thing that had crawled free of it wasn't alone. And neither was I. Somewhere in the dark, that laughter echoed again, curling through the air like something alive. And I understood. I hadn't buried one thing. I had buried two. And now both had come back. To finish what we started. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.